Fallout has some absolutely absurd shit in its lore, whether it's the fully sentient Deathclaws living in Vault 13 or a society of cybernetic raccoons living somewhere in the Midwest. This world has some pretty outrageous things to be seen. However, there is one thing that isn't completely absurd, and that's space travel.
For as long as history has been recorded, man has had an insatiable hunger for knowledge regarding the universe. To understand why man is so interested in this unknown expanse of space around our little world, we must take a journey. Please, sit back, relax, and free yourself from the bonds of our planet as we take off for the stars. Star, planet as we stars.
Hell, look inside the Museum of Freedom in Concord, there's a fucking mural to a battle fought on the moon. Not to mention a massive fucking space laser powered by the sun, or the hellfire that rains death upon Liberty Prime in Fallout 3. Space, or at least its orbit, and the largest natural satellite of Earth has been explored by the humans in the Fallout universe. And with the companies like ArcJet, Vault-Tec, Poseidon Energy, United States Space Administration, and Repcon Aerospace all paving the way for space exploration in a time of war, being controlled by the one, the only, Enclave. Now some of you that are as lonely as I am are familiar with the Fallout lore, but just in case, here's a refresher. The Enclave's original plan was to leave the planet and colonize a new world with the remaining US government and those within the Vault-Tec vaults. Now this may come as a shock to some of you, but the vaults were nothing more than a test varying from the downright brutal like Vault 77, one man in a crate full of puppets, to the more tame like Vault 101 that was designed to remain closed indefinitely. So the question is, did the Enclave evacuate to space after the bombs fell? So if we leave it at face value from what we know in the games, then the answer would be a huge resounding no. Well, hold on now, Commodore, settle down, put those pitchforks and torches away. Now where was I? Right, the Enclave are living in space. Now before we can move forward, we have to go back, and I mean way back, to the far off year of 2077. So let's take a look at the Enclave's timeline from here, shall we? From the year 2077 to 2241, the Enclave resided on the Poseidon Energy oil rig that was 150-ish miles off the coast of California. Then, the Chosen One decided to say fuck it and blow the whole goddamn thing sky high. After that, in 2242, the remaining forces of the Enclave were housed in the oil refinery in Navarro, but soon Autumn Sr. led the large majority to the capital wasteland at the request of the new president John Henry Eden. And in the later half of the year 2277, they made themselves known to the capital wastes. Then in 2278, after their major defeat at Project Purity and the remaining forces are scattered across the waste, presumed to be finally beaten. There's a big old 35-year gap there. Yeah, right there. From 2242 to 2277. Where the fuck were the Enclave? I mean, they have vertibirds, so the travel to DC had to be reduced to a few hours. The average flight from California to Washington, DC is about 6.5 hours, so if they don't deal with layovers or air traffic control, that time should be reduced by a small amount, right? So, let's get that straight. 6.5 hours of that 35-year gap, rather the 306,600 hour gap, was spent in transit between California and DC. Well, they certainly beat the Lions Brotherhood to DC. I mean, the Brotherhood walked. That's a 940-hour, 3,000-mile journey on foot. But what were the Enclave doing in that time? They didn't take over the capital. They had plenty of time before they had any real competition from the Brotherhood of Steel. So were they just sitting around with their foot up their asses? I propose the exact opposite, actually. They spent that time doing more than the Brotherhood could ever imagine. So the pre-war Enclave, otherwise known as the US government, had a plan that they were going to follow to a fucking T. Once the bombs hit, many of the Enclave personnel would make their way to the oil rig. Well, not all were going to make it, and they needed to save as many of their own as they could. So, special vaults were built to house them to wait for the all-clear from the main Enclave operation on the oil rig. Now, their original plan was to launch a rocket from the oil rig and travel to an unknown destination in space. But the war was drawing near and the Enclave were running out of time, so in 2076, the Enclave commandeered the Hermes 13 rocket that was being built in Bloomfield, California, a mere 93 miles outside of Navarro. The Hermes 13 was being built for a secret mission to Mars and had been commissioned to do so by the USSA. However, the USSA put the Hermes 13 project on hold until the Enclave commandeered it. The Enclave intended to use this rocket to leave Earth, yet they were unable to finish the Hermes 13 due to unforeseen complications, and then the bombs dropped. So, the Hermes 13 was just left in the wake of nuclear destruction, and the Enclave personnel that left shut down the sub-reactor powering the facility and sealed the doors. So the rocket and the reactor are just sitting, waiting for anyone to come by and scrap them for parts. However, before the bombs fell, the Enclave were able to build a space station in orbit that housed 24 nuclear missiles, each missile carrying 4 warheads. The only thing missing from the station was the nuclear reactor that powered the damn thing and the nuclear launch instruction codes. So, the Enclave were building a rocket and had a space station in orbit waiting for them, and now they're just sitting there, waiting to be used. So, what if once the radiation levels dropped low enough, the Enclave reclaimed the Hermes 13 from Bloomfield? If that was the case, the Enclave would have their rocket. It's doubtful that it would still function, but the majority of the parts can be reused and the rest rebuilt. I propose that in that 35-year gap, the Enclave salvaged their rocket and headed east to the capital, stopping at REPCONN in Nevada, ArcJet in Boston, and Adams Air Force Base in Virginia. Why REPCONN, you might be asking yourself? Well, our friends at REPCONN were the ones who designed and tested the Delta IX rocket, and it was a huge success. They even had a Delta IX rocket put on display in the Aerospace Museum in Washington, D.C. Well, after the Delta IX rocket, they moved on to development of an orbital propulsion system, but soon switched to the weaponizing of their plasma technology. However, when Poseidon Energy tried to buy out the company, they refused, instead being bought out by Robert House's Robco. Although the Enclave and Poseidon Energy lost REPCONN to Robco, that wouldn't stop them from using espionage to spy on REPCONN and Robert House. So with their spies in place, they learned of the rocket testing facility and the nuclear and plasma orbital propulsion. It would make sense for the Enclave to visit these facilities and take whatever they needed for their rocket and space station after their 200 years spent planning. This would explain why the Enclave have a refueling station in the mountains outside of Vegas, and why a crashed vertibird can be found in the Mojave. Looking at the crash site, it appears that the bird was making its way back to California, possibly with intel on the facilities and recon reports of the area surrounding REPCONN. It is reasonable to assume that within that 35-year gap, the Enclave spent a minor portion of it in or around the Mojave Wasteland. Soon after their scavenging in the Mojave Wasteland, they made their way eastward to Chicago and established an outpost there for refueling. This outpost can be confirmed by Eddie and Dr. Whitley, stating that he is sending Eddie to the Navarro outpost and that those in Chicago should prepare him to the best of their ability. So Eddie was going to the refueling station that was used in the Mojave after stopping in Chicago. Then he was damaged and left the Mojave Express outpost in Primm. So the Enclave were making their way across the United States, setting up refueling stations for their vertibirds. Now the Enclave have finally made it to the capital wasteland. Autumn Sr., Colonel Autumn's father, establishes contact with the new president, keeping a secret that Eden is really just a Zax supercomputer that has developed a personality. Now, not much is known about what happened to Autumn Sr. once they reached the capital, but what I can assume is he was the one that planned to use the Enclave's pre-war space station and is the reason they are scavenging and setting refueling stations along the way. Once fully established in the capital, the Enclave headed for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, looking for the one and only ArcJet systems. In the year 2075, ArcJet had begun working on a nuclear-powered rocket called the XMB booster engine. Now this is of note because ArcJet was commissioned by the United States Space Administration for the Mars Shot project. I can only assume this is the same project that Hermes 13 was being built for as well, so the original Hermes 13 rocket had a prototype XMB engine, if not a plan to use one. Sadly, the XMB suffered a setback in 2076 due to it being hundreds of tons overweight. This weight issue set them back 4 to 6 months, and eventually the project was put on hold due to the accidental death of a reporter during a test fire. This explains why the Hermes 13 was never used and why the Enclave would choose this rocket to commandeer. Hell, the fucking thing was just about finished when the bombs fell. The only thing that was missing was the engine that is now sitting in the Commonwealth waiting to be scrapped, just like the Hermes 13 was. But luckily for the Enclave, the test rocket remained inside the ArcJet test facility, fully operational. As well as the test rocket, it looks like the Hermes 13 XMB engine was on its way for delivery. An XMB engine can be found sitting on the side of the road in the Commonwealth, however this copy does not work and if activated will explode. So then this explains why the Enclave armor can be found in the Commonwealth, along with their crashed vertibird. They most likely sent out scout parties and scavenger teams to locate and bring back the parts needed to finish their rocket. So that just leaves the Enclave. They had their asses handed to them in the battle for Project Purity, and the Lone Wanderer and the Brotherhood of Steel took out the remaining forces at the Adams Air Force Base and the satellite relay station. After that, they scattered across the wasteland and haven't been heard from since. So, end of story, right? Wrong. Now, like I said prior, the Enclave are being led by Autumn Sr., Colonel Autumn's father. Yet this man is never seen, but somehow led the remaining forces from Navarro to DC and then vanished. There is nothing written about what happened to Autumn Sr., just that his son, Colonel Autumn, took command. While I think Autumn Sr. is alive, and well, in space. Let's look at it again. The Enclave left Navarro for the capital. Along the way, they established key refueling stations throughout the country, collecting valuable parts for their Hermes 13 along the way. Now, the fact that the Enclave did not assault the capital once arriving in DC is because Autumn Sr. is a scientist, lacking the knowledge of how to properly fight the super mutants and mercenaries that scatter the area, all while keeping their losses to a minimum. But what he can do is devise a plan to reclaim old world tech that will give them the upper hand in any battle. Now, they reclaimed Adams Air Force Base for the simple fact they needed the mobile launch platform that is being stored there. Now the Enclave have their rocket, Hermes 13, the XMB engine, and the launch platform. Not to mention more spare parts than they need to build a functioning rocket. So given the amount of time it takes the Brotherhood of Steel to build the Prydwen, 10 years or so, and the Enclave's more advanced level of technology, not to mention their proper skill needed to take up this task, means that in that 35-year gap, they could have easily built a functioning rocket. But what's next? The Enclave send Autumn Sr. up along with the portion of the science staff to reclaim their pre-war relic, their space station, armed with 24 nuclear weapons. They now have the upper hand in almost every battle for the foreseeable future. Using nuclear weapons on American soil, however, isn't their intent. They want to officially end communism, and mean to take aim on China to completely eradicate the Red Menace at all cost. Although, once in space, they reconnect with the satellite known as the Bradley Hercules. This satellite is armed with 8 non-nuclear warheads, and the Enclave have free reign with them against the Brotherhood. So, Autumn Sr. is in space, on the Enclave space station, repairing it with a team of top Enclave scientists, while Colonel Autumn Jr. has taken over the reins of the military forces left at Raven Rock. Unfortunately for the Enclave, Navarro was lost, and the remnants were sent scattered across the waste. Then the Brotherhood arrived in the capital wasteland and set up shop to stop the mutant horde. So Colonel Autumn found it best to fight off the Brotherhood and claim Project Purity for their own, winning back the hearts and the minds of the people of the capital wasteland. But no, said the Brotherhood of Steel and kicked their collective asses out of DC, cementing their claim on the capital wasteland. For now, Autumn Sr. sits on the throne in the sky, awaiting the right moment to bring back the Enclave. There it is. The Enclave are in space, and they got a bunch of fucking nuclear warheads, and they're just waiting to just unleash them. And Colonel Autumn Sr. is probably dead by now, given the time span. Putting him at like 25, like 30, when they left in 2242, putting him at least 65 to 70, and then now he's at least 80. Colonel Autumn Sr. is at least 80 on that space station now, at least. So he could be dead. He's probably dead, to be completely honest. But that doesn't mean he didn't leave someone else in charge, and they're still sat up there like, hey, bitches, we're going to blow the fuck out of you, right? Oh, and if you guys find any holes in my theory, let me know. I love it. I love it a lot because, and I'm being completely serious, because it means that I can do more research. And I love reading lore on Fallout. I know more lore about Fallout and Fallout history than I do about our own history. I mean, I exaggerate, obviously, but I mean, it's still fun to tell people that because they look at me like I'm insane. I'm rambling anyway. Thanks for watching. I've been talking for like the last 10 minutes. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks, ShoddyCast, for the opportunity, and hopefully you guys like it. And have a good one. Bye.